The Wooded Path. I work for the phones for the emergency ambulance service in a town about an hour away from where I live. I don't drive yet, so I'm reliant on the train to get to and from work. Last winter I had an awful experience on my journey home from work. It was a Sunday, and I was on a 12-hour shift, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. My train leaves at 7:30 p.m., and I usually have no problems in catching it, but my relief was late, so I didn't get away until about 7:15 p.m. As it was a Sunday, the trains were less frequent, and my next train wasn't until about 9 p.m. I didn't much fancy sitting on a cold, wet station platform for over an hour, nor did I want to stick around at work, as I was back on the shift at 7 a.m. the next morning, and I wanted to get home to my bed. So I decided that instead of taking my usual route to the train station, I would take the shortcut. I usually steer clear of the shortcut, as it takes me down a long, lonely, wooded path, but I was exhausted and just wanted to get home. I'd heard stories about people getting attacked down that path, but I told myself it was probably nothing more than mere rumors, and I'd be happy with it once I'd done it once I was on the train home. I got to the path and started down. I remember it was very cold that day and it had been snowing for hours. There was a lot of icy slush down the path, making the ground dangerously slippy, difficult to keep my footing on. The street lights down the path were few and far between, creating little pools of light with small dense patches of blackness in the spaces between them. As I was walking, I kept hearing a strange noise like a rough cackling, almost like dry dead leaves being crushed underfoot. Not possible, of course, with the waterlogged environment. I tried not to let it bother me, but as I kept walking, that crackling noise continued, almost as though it was keeping up with me, mirroring my own hairy pace. It was unsettling, and I remember drawing my coat tightly around myself, as though it could offer protection against anything lurking in the shadows. As I passed through a dark spot, I heard another sound, a dry, choked gurgle. During my time in this job, I've sadly heard a few people's last breaths. It's difficult to describe the sound. It's like an awful rasping rattle that sends chills up your spine. If you've ever heard it, you'll know what I mean. That was the noise I heard. I admit I was scared by this point, some of the worst stories about this lonely place coming to the forefront of my mind, but I was over halfway down the path, and I thought it would be best to just keep going. I moved as quickly as I could to the next patch of light, hitting it just as the breathless rattle got louder. So I paused there for a moment, trying to see around me to the spot as the source of the darkness. As I was standing, I became aware of something in front of me. Something blocking my way, hidden in the darkness ahead of me. I strained my eyes to see anything, but it was too black to discern anything in the shadows. I was shaking by this point. I almost turned around, but the idea of backtracking down the path did not appeal to me at all. In an effort to calm my nerves, I took my phone out and shone the light of it towards the murky patch ahead of me. I still couldn't see anything, so I forced myself to keep walking, all but skating across the wet ground, and right as I hit the middle of the dark spot, my phone died in my hand. Stood in the inky blackness all on my own, I felt terror like I've never felt before, and God willing I'll never feel again. For a moment I was sure I would faint. The world tipped dizzily around me and my chest ached with fear. I almost tripped over myself trying to scramble back into the light, when I heard, closer than ever before, the same deathly gurgle. Something touched me, then briefly, and only lightly, a cold, wet flutter of movement across my cheek, while that noise choked and sputtered in my ear. I ran. I fell twice during the mad dash, twisting my knee on the second fall, though I must have discovered later how hard I must have hit it. When I got to the end of the path, I could still hear that terrible noise, and I turned. Creeping out of the shadowy patch closest to me came a tall figure, moving stealthily forwards, rasping and sputtering. I did not stay long enough to get a good look at the thing, and so I can't give a good description of it, save to say that it gave me the unmistakable impression of outright malevolence. I fled to the train station, only just catching my train and spending the rest of my journey home, shaking and terrified. I have no idea what it was that I encountered down that long, lonely path, but I do know that nothing would ever induce me to set foot on it again.